You've heard the conventional view. Now prepare yourself to hear the other side. High school teachers Mike Margison and Justin Spears bring you the alternative view you didn't get in the classroom. Now here they are, Margison and Spears.
All right. Good evening. You are listening to The Other Side with Margison and Spears. I am Justin Spears, one half of The Other Side, joined as always with me tonight, Mr. Mike Margison. Mike, what is going on?
Not much. I was actually just reading an article right before we got on here about how they started filming for the sequel to Top Gun. That is awesome news.
Yeah, that's going to bring us back to our childhood for sure. No doubt about that. Yeah, pretty awesome. It's when you know you're getting old, right?
Yeah, seriously.
All right. Well, we've got a special bonus episode lined up for you this evening. This is one where Mike and I have been having some side conversations lately above and beyond what we normally cover here on the show. And if you've listened here recently, we've got lined up a terrific series on the presidents of the United States. And just in conversations, we said, this stuff is things that we want to make sure we cover on the show. And so Mike brought up the idea of, hey, let's just put a bonus show together, man, and do it that way. And I thought, oh, that sounds good to me. We can definitely work that in. So what we thought we would do here tonight is going to be somewhat rapid fire. We'll spend more time on some things than others, but we just got a couple of things that, you know, as we go about our day, things that pertain to us in our daily lives or current event news stories that are going on throughout the country that we had some thoughts on and wanted to kind of weigh in on here on the show. So again, what we want to kind of start with here is Mike and I, you know, we know the story behind the show. Both he and I are educators. We've been in education now for over 10 years each. And, you know, we've evolved our thoughts on the state of public education. It's something we're very passionate about. We're in the process of doing some research and hopefully potentially that materializes into something a little bit later on down the road here. But in kind of our lives, right? We both have kids that are either in the public school system or soon to be in the public school system. And it's kind of unique in that I've got, you know, my two a little bit ahead of yours, right, Mike? And so, yeah. You know, I'm often able to come in and share stories with you, right? And tell you a little bit about what's going on. And, you know, I think just in general, one of the things that I've noticed, and I've tried to do this, Mike, and maybe you can kind of speak to this a little bit too now that years are starting to enter in, is, you know, definitely try to flip the switch between being an educator and being a parent, but also knowing that, you know, you're in education. And so I always try to make sure that anytime that there's going to be any kind of parent contact with my boy's teacher, that I try to separate myself, but not completely. You know, I empathize with teachers a little bit. And so sometimes where maybe you might fly off the handle or maybe not fully understand or know what's going on, you know, you kind of got some inside baseball, you know, lingo and talk that you can look for, and you kind of know the game a little bit, right? And so I had a situation here where, you know, I had some questions come up at the way that things were going down in my kid's school, particularly with one of my boys, and you know, reached out to the teacher to kind of ask some questions, and really just, I guess, for lack of a better word, just disappointed by what's going on in school today. And this isn't necessarily intended to put this teacher on blast or anything. It's more of a commentary, I think, on the state of education as a whole. And Mike, you and I have both talked about what's happening, especially at the elementary level, where the kids are the most vulnerable, where they're still so moldable, and you know, they come in with a passion and a desire to want to learn. You know, especially my youngest, man, he just really has kind of that desire and burning in him to learn things. He's constantly coming to me with ideas. He's so creative. He's so innovative. And what we see happening here is he's being worksheeted to death. The love of learning is being sucked right out of him. In addition to that, our kids are being overassessed. My youngest son has 4 tests on Friday as a third grader. He has a vocabulary, a spelling, a language arts, and I forget, maybe like a reading comprehension. They're all language arts based tests, all on a Friday. Um, and you and I were talking a little bit about the impact that this is having, the anxiety, the stress. It's killing the love of learning. I think it's just really a sad state of affairs today with where we are in education. What have you seen so far in regards to this?
Well, yeah, I mean, the same thing, and this is not unique to what we've covered previously on the show. So, like you said, this isn't to put anybody on blast or to single anybody out, but this is just a great example of really a lot of the episodes that we covered over the summer. When you showed me, when you brought to me some of the work and some of the corrections that were on the work from your son, the only thing that I could think is, what is the objective here? And I think that should be the primary question for every educator when you're designing a lesson plan or designing a unit plan or designing an assessment, or even like right before you're about to start class. You need to have an honest discussion with yourself. Like, what is the objective here? What do I want to happen? And if the objective is to have the kids, sitting in an orderly fashion, or being quiet, or going through procedures, or being these beautiful little robotic creatures that is so completely unnatural for them. I know that because just when they come home, they're bouncing off the walls, probably because they've been sitting in the desk following very specific, meaningless orders for so long. But yeah, that was the thing that really got me when I looked at those. When I looked at mainly the corrections that were on your son's worksheets, is what is the objective? What are you trying to get across, other than to put a bad grade on this and make the kid feel less than worthy? I mean, it was baffling to me.
Yeah, and I was thinking on this earlier today too, and I'm sure you could probably add to this a little bit yourself. Is listen, I'm not perfect in the classroom by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, there are periods throughout the day, days throughout the week, weeks throughout the year, so on and so forth, where I just don't have it. I misidentify, I misread my class, my lesson isn't good. Those things are going to happen. But what I always try to take pride in with what I do as an educator is the reflecting part and adjusting, always kind of being, flexible and ready to adapt. I currently am in a place right now where what I have done in the past, I can tell already at this point in the year, is not going to work with, what I did over the last like year or two, where it's just a different mix of kids. And, what I see is, as a side effect of all this, my lessons are geared toward critical thinking. I do very, very little in the way of like foundational memorization, vocabulary, rote memorization. I get what I think is the base knowledge out either through direct instruction, or the reading of an article or a website or a book excerpt or whatever it might be. And then, man, we're spending time breaking that down. And I find that increasingly harder to do with kids because their critical thinking skills are not where they should be. And I think a lot of it is a result of what they're conditioned to do as they go through education. And listen, I'm not throwing stones at elementary teachers and saying we have it all figured out and perfect at the secondary level. I'm just saying, because there are teachers at the high school and middle schools that do this as well. They just don't know how to critically think. I gave an assignment today on federalism, and I had my kids kind of going through and breaking down what that term meant. And they could all write down the definition clearly. I mean, every student in the classroom had the ability to Google the phrase federalism and write a definition down. But when I asked them to explain that to me, what does that mean? I mean, first off, they almost completely disengaged from wanting to engage in that conversation, and those that did really struggled with, trying to understand the idea of taking power and dividing it between a federal government, a national government, and a state and local government, and we're trying to work our way through that. And I could tell they were getting frustrated with it, and so then I tried to go to a different route, and again, it was just a little bit more frustration to the point where I kind of said, okay, let's stop for today and we'll pick it back up tomorrow and see if, maybe some time will kind of help there a little bit. But I just think that kind of thing is, just it's not emphasized at all. What say you?
Yeah, unfortunately and again, this is a condition of the system of the institution. This is not any individual teacher's fault and yeah, let me reiterate, first of all, what you said in the beginning. I'm not perfect, far from it. Make a lot of mistakes in the classroom, and there are a lot of lessons that I wish I could pull back. There are a lot of units that I wish I could pull back. But I do reflect and I do try and get better. And I am right now, I think you and I are both in this process where we are really trying to gauge the needs of the kids and meet them, like actually meet the needs of the kids rather than just put them through these processes of typical school. But anyway, getting back to the original point, yeah, it's those processes that we can see these kids, they know how to do them. And they're good kids. I mean, they really are. The kids that we get in high school, they're good kids. And I get a lot of them who, it's almost like they're like, look, Margison, just give me the worksheet and I'll do the worksheet and I'll look it up in the book and I'll do all this. It's like I'm willing to put the work in, but the critical thinking questions or the discussion or like the analytical stuff or the synthesizing, they just don't want to do that. Not because they're bad or lazy, just because it's not a skill that has been developed. And we talk all the time in education about, preparing kids for the outside world and becoming problem solvers and stuff. But we do the absolute opposite in school, like the absolute opposite, by putting on these strict arbitrary time schedules and creating work to fill them. And this is the work we're seeing the fruition of it now.
Yeah, and you and I both listened to a Tom Woods episode not too long ago where he had a software developer from Silicon Valley on who had created a math curriculum called MathBot, and what he was trying to accomplish with this was getting kids to apply the math that they learn, kind of going back to the way that we all learned math prior to Common Core, and really what that has done to kids is just turn them completely off to math. And I don't blame them one bit. One of the things that resonated with me, because my oldest son is really like this, is, the guy was explaining, how math is taught procedurally. And he was saying, there are so many kids who, when you think about math as a problem solving skill, they learn how to solve the problem. And then they want to apply that in terms of solving a problem or using it to do something with, not reproducing the same set of procedures over and over and over. And that just really resonated with me because my son is one that once he can demonstrate that he knows how to multiply or add, he doesn't want to do it 25, 40, 50 more times on a worksheet. And I can't say that I blame him. I've seen these time tests before where the same question is asked multiple times on a worksheet, let alone, just going through and repetitively doing it over and over again. And I just really think those are the kinds of things that we're focused on, and we're just killing this passion and desire of kids to want to learn and to do really cool things with the knowledge that they can achieve. Instead, we're just so married to the standards and the curriculum and things of that nature. I really kind of hope that we can see a taking back at the building level, within the classroom, more and more of teachers, taking control of this and kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, bucking the system a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we talk about, the question, what is the objective? First of all, and we hear this a lot at the high school level about making sure that we reach every kid. And it's just so frustrating to me because this is a system designed to exclude certain kids. It's a system that is designed to exclude kids who do not want to sit in a desk and do these just repetitive process over and over, like you said. It's designed to. It's really designed for that kind of do-gooder student who will sit
Mhm.
there and follow the instructions and play school correctly. But if we're serious about reaching every kid, then we do need to start to introduce stuff like MathBot into the classroom. And we need to start thinking honestly and seriously about, okay, do we need 60 minutes every single day? I mean, if the objective is clearly to get this student to learn math, um, and there are programs out there that will allow them to actually do math logically, and that I recommend that episode of the Tom Woods Show. This guy was talking about how math is it's a logical procedure, but the way that it's taught is the opposite. It's like this, just step by step, and it's not the way that kids are supposed to learn it. And so he developed this program where you essentially program a robot and teach them to do things, and you're using math logically in order to solve these problems and solve these equations. But yeah, it might not be 60 minutes a day. It might be 20 minutes a day. Or if a kid really likes it, they might want to do it for 80 minutes a day. But when we're stuck in these structures and we're trying to jam a square peg into a round hole, it's beyond frustrating, when we see what it does to these kids.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think, when you were just mentioning that there too, to kind of wrap this up, and I know, again, as you said before, earlier, we've covered these things before in some of the summer episodes that we did on education. You can go check those out in our archives. But you were talking about what the system was designed to do. The system is designed to break their will. I mean, it's designed to say, like, look, you're growing up, and in this country, you're experiencing all of these different emotions and all of these different things around you, and the curiosity is just running rampant. And here we're going to take them and put them into a system that tells them, you're going to take math, you're going to take science, you're going to take English, you're going to take this, you're going to take that. And you might have a kid that just, maybe doesn't have as much of a desire to want to learn the sciences. Maybe doesn't have as much of a desire to want to go through, 12 years of language arts classes. If they're at a certain reading level and a certain writing level, why do they have to take a 12th grade English class? Let them take a mechanics class. Let them get in as a journeyman. We've talked about this stuff before. The thing that, and I'll just leave it with this. Earlier this week in my government class, I brought this idea up of them having to be in my class, because I said, look, guys, I get it. I get this all the time. I get a lot of students who have almost zero desire to want to learn about how U.S. government functions and works. Now, I know there are people out there who say, well, they got to learn civics. There's all kinds of studies out there about how people don't know about what's going on in the government, so on and so forth. I'm not necessarily saying that learning about civics is unimportant. What I'm saying is why does it need to occur right now at this point in time in their life? They could be using this 60, 65 minutes a day, again, down on the stage, learning how to produce a show, in a cosmetology program, in a HVAC program. They could be working with our shop instructor. They could be learning a myriad of skills that would be of interest and passion to them. How excited would they be about coming to school? And you know what? Maybe when they're in their mid 20s, they pick up some book. I didn't pick up a lot of the political and historical knowledge that I have until I was well out of high school. So I just don't understand the bureaucrats and the system being formed the way that it is, that just pushes kids into things where they clearly have zero desire to be there. And what does that accomplish? It just completely kills any momentum. It completely kills any kind of desire that you as the teacher have in the classroom. When you look at 26 desks and you have the eyeball staring back at you, glazed over, thinking we would rather be anywhere else right now other than right here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when, I mean, if you look at our class 5 times a week, you're doing something for 350, or I mean, for us, it's 70 minutes a class. So that's, 350 minutes a week. But even at the elite colleges, you might meet 3 times 50 minutes, or twice a week, an hour and a half. You're not coming anywhere near the amount of time that we have to spend with these kids on this subject that they're not interested in. And what that turns into in class after class is busy work that these kids don't want to do. And then once they express their frustration, what do? We go and we put them in solitary confinement. We put them in school suspension. We give them a detention and make them stay longer. I mean, it's mind numbing when you actually step back and you look at it and you go, what in the world is this? What kind of system is this? If there were a system that was designed purposely to absolutely excoriate kids' creativity and happiness, it would be high school. I mean, in my opinion, the way that it's designed now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I just don't understand why there's not more, I guess, pushback is the only thing that can come to my mind from, the school districts on up to the states toward the federal government, in terms of understanding, content control and curriculum control needs to be at a district level, needs to be at the classroom level, to be quite honest with you. It should be, the ideas of what goes on in one's classroom, you should have complete creative control as a teacher. And there should be a feeling and an expectation that at any point in time, an administrator walks in, so long as they can gauge that learning is occurring, and whether that, however you measure that, and whether it's you go up to the students and you say, explain to me, tell me what you learned today in class, and that can clearly be communicated by a majority of the students, then you're doing something right. You don't need data, you don't need formative assessments, you don't need checks for understanding, you don't need all of this. Like you said, the kids do busy work, we have to do busy work. We have to do all of this stuff to satisfy what is called best practices, easy for me to say, and pedagogy, which has been completely just twisted and contorted in our universities today. These poor teachers that are coming out of universities don't stand a chance when they enter into the American high school, or any public school for that matter, classroom today, because they've been fed this line of garbage about what they need to do, and they've lost complete sight and understanding of what really counts in the classroom. And I just don't really understand why there hasn't been more of a reform push from the districts and the states on this. It's beyond me.
I think it's job security, but that's just my pessimistic viewpoint. I'm serious. So
probably a grain of truth to that, larger than what we want to acknowledge. So at any rate, that was something that was kind of on the forefront of our mind this week. But Mike, I know in conversation that you and I had, I came across a video today as we switched gears here. I came across a video earlier today of Elizabeth Warren, who is highly controversial, again, irregardless of
Pocahontas.
Yeah, that's right. Political.
Some people may know her better as Pocahontas.
That's right. Yeah, clearly her Native American ancestry qualifies her to be a state senator. She went on, I believe it was Chris Cuomo, CNN, and the topic of the discussion was the unfortunate news of what we learned about Molly Tibbetts, the young girl who was unfortunately, body was found murdered by, and happened to be by, an illegal immigrant. And so this sparked up the question, as it has in other scenarios like this before, about the immigration debate. And she had the audacity to turn the line of questioning around into essentially, well, yeah, that's sad for Molly and their family, but we got to think about these families that are being ripped apart at the border.
Oh yeah, she dismissed it, just like almost out of hand, and then changed the subject.
Yeah,
That's
and yeah, I just don't understand. Irregardless of political beliefs and leanings and things of that nature, just completely tone deaf, insensitive. You could use the adjective you want there, but I know you kind of wanted to maybe talk a little bit about this kind of, I guess, would you call it a myth, or just the misconstruing of these families being ripped apart by the Trump administration?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I would call it a myth. I would just call it more of a one-sided biased media attack that, like most things you get from the mainstream media, totally ignores the other side. And so that's one of the reasons we come on and we do this. But yeah, with the Elizabeth Warren thing, for people who didn't see the clip, she got the question, which is, look, this guy was here illegally. He murdered Molly Tibbetts. He admitted to it. Can't you at least make an argument that he should not have been here and that we need some tougher security? And she said her obligatory, well, my heart goes out to the Tibbetts family. And then, yeah, she immediately went to the border. What I've seen this administration do is tear families apart at the border. And look, what in the world does that have to do with an illegal immigrant working on a farm who chased down a jogger, murdered her, and then threw her in a cornfield? I don't understand the connection. What does family separation at the border have? What does one have to do with the other? So I just thought that was inexcusable for her to answer like that. But then, yeah, I also want to talk about this hysteria about separating families at the border. And this is usually just attributed to Trump. And first off, this predates Trump. I think hopefully that should be obvious to everybody. I don't know if it is, but this is not a Trump policy. I think that there was a picture or something going around social media a few months ago. Maybe you can help me out with this, Justin. There was a picture of some children in cages and I think the usual suspects like CNN and MSNBC, they retweeted it or tweeted it out. And it showed children in detention centers down at the border, and they were in cages. And then it had some nasty things to say about Trump. And it turns out that those photos were taken in 2014 during the Obama administration. And what do you hear from MSNBC during that time? Cricket, nothing. I mean, they didn't say anything. So I mean, that whole the emphasis on this has nothing to do with separation itself. It has everything to do with the fact that Trump is in the White House and they absolutely hate this guy. They want to call him a racist. And so that's the narrative that they have to drive. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some poll numbers that are driving that narrative for them. They have to make this claim. But anyhow, with this family separation stuff, not only was it happening during the Obama administration and not being talked about, let's talk about the idea of family separation anyway. If I were to, Justin, I don't know, if I were to rob a convenience store and then get in my car and drive away, and the cops were to catch me and turn me over and arrest me, and I had my kids in the back seat, guess what would happen? I would get separated from my kids, because that's the obvious police tactic. It didn't even have to be robbing a liquor store. So, okay, maybe so you might say, okay, yeah, well, you're a violent criminal. Let's do it for the children's sake. If I had a warrant out for my arrest because of a failure to appear in court or something like that, and I got pulled over for a broken taillight and they were to arrest me, guess what? My kids are not coming to jail with me if they're in the back seat. There is a separation there. Family separation is not something that was dreamt up by Donald Trump and applied only to Mexicans at the border. Family separation is something that police do when they have to incarcerate or arrest an adult. This is something that happens. The children are removed and taken somewhere else. When you break the law and you're going to get arrested, you're separated from your children. And in these cases, when you break the law by crossing the border illegally and you're going to be arrested, you're going to get separated from your children. This happens in every walk of life. It doesn't matter if you are Mexican or white or black or Asian, big or tall, it's irrelevant, right? You break the law, there is going to be separation. So I want to get that point out first. But secondly, it's like we did this segment last week on taking the discussion from the middle and like not even working your way back. We almost forget that there are legal points of entry in this country. There are ports of entry, legal ports of entry, where you can show up and you won't get separated from your family. Why? Because you're not breaking the law. It's talked about as if any time under Trump's directive, anytime a Border Patrol agent sees a brown-looking family, the first thing they do is drive a wedge between the kids and the parents and make sure that they never see each other again. And it's just a false narrative. And for Elizabeth Warren to come on CNN and talk about that as a response to this young girl getting killed, it was about the most despicable thing I think I've ever seen. It was absolutely pathetic. She should apologize.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that point there too about the going back to the root cause here, because there's just absolutely no discussion at all about the idea of these people being illegal immigrants, right? That they are bypassing the legal process. And I know that people on the other side have tried to say, look, it demeans those of us that have gone through the legal process. It is very, very difficult to go through all of the bureaucratic processes and red tape and everything to get here, to have to go through all the means of getting your legal status and citizenship ultimately. And when we just turn a blind eye to that, it completely undermines the law. And there's so much to that to unpack. But yeah, I mean, absolutely going back to that root cause of being here illegally. And about the only defense that I've heard leftists throw up in regard to this is, well, you don't understand what those people are facing at home. They're running from drug lords and civil war and just absolute poverty. And what about give us your weak, your huddled masses, and basically advocating for open borders. And really, there's just no merit to that at all. There's no reason to say that, because look, there's people all across this planet that are facing strife and hardship. And if we were just to say, let everybody come, I mean, you would crash the system. And I know that's something that many people think the left is trying to do, is overwhelm the system so that it crashes and then they can seize control of it and so on and so forth. But that's about the only critique that I've even heard attempted to try to justify this, because there is no justification to it. Once you basically say you can pick and choose how you want to enforce the law, that is a very, very slippery slope to be on, and creates a very, very unfortunate situation for those that are in the business of enforcing the law.
Yeah, Walter Williams he came out with an article, and it was probably like 6 months ago or so, on immigration. And he said, look, there are three basic questions that you have to ask, but really the first two were of the utmost importance. And so if you are talking with a leftist about this, the first question is, yes or no, does everybody on the planet have a right to live in the United States? And it's just a simple yes or no question. And if you give the obvious answer, which is no, then you've pretty much solved the debate right there. I mean, it's essentially over. And I think if you get a committed leftist, they might say yes. Yes, everybody on the planet has the right to live in the United States. Well, that's just absurd sounding. That's just ridiculous. So if you can at least concede that no, not everybody on the planet has the right to live in the United States, you can follow up with the next question, which is, does a country have the right to decide who should and should not come into their country? And again, These are two very simple questions. And the answer to both of those is most obviously yes. I mean, 99.9% of people who you ask would say yes. And that's essentially everything else is we're just quibbling over details. But anybody would agree that not everybody on the planet has a right to be here, and the government does have a right to decide who can come into their country and who cannot. And if you can agree on those two things, then we're all basically on the same page when it comes to immigration. Everything else is just political and nothing more.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And I wish that there was a way to just be a little bit more level-headed or even-handed with the approach on this. And I think once you, like you said, once you get the machine of the media on your side and they're controlling the narrative, and to the point where we obviously have seen like the sanctuary cities and just policies that are trying to be pushed through both houses, the Congress and the Senate. It's unfortunate that it's come down to this, because I think it's put a lot of strain on this country in many different ways, from the people that are serving and protecting, through ICE and other, other people in the government, to, these communities that have to live with these tragedies that happen, when things like, I mean, look, we had something happen here in the Indiana, in the Indianapolis area not too long ago, where a Colts player was killed by a drunk driver who was here illegally. And so it's happening with more and more frequency. And I think as it happens, it's going to continue to raise awareness. And I know sometimes this is an on again, off again topic that is, in the mainstream media now. With this incident, it may be back in the forefront again. Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, for sure. So, what else you have on the docket here, Mike? Anything else you wanted to go over here tonight?
Let's see, we got a little education. We got some Elizabeth Warren. That's always good. You got, well, it looks like Manafort has gotten himself in trouble. This is going to be interesting to see what happens. Look, I think that if there was a smoking gun on Trump with this Russia collusion absolute nonsense, that we would have to have gotten it by now. Because with Manafort about to go down, and just so everybody is clear, this is all about tax evasion stuff that predates the Trump campaign. So it's from long ago. It's a lot of the same stuff with Michael Cohen. But I think if there were anything that would directly link Trump to Russia, one of these two guys would be able to put it forth right now. Because if not, I don't think they're going to. I mean, Manafort's probably going to die in jail, to be honest. I think he's too old. So, unless he's relying on a presidential pardon. But what I'm hoping here is that this is going to bring an end to this absolute three-ring circus that I'm just so sick of hearing about. Because I really do think that if there was something definitive, then this guy would spill it to save his hide. But I truly do not think that we're going to hear anything. But with that being the case, after that, this should be the end of it. We should be able to put a zipper on this thing and bury it for good.
Yeah, I'll be completely honest with you. I have not really followed this story closely at all. I've seen obviously headlines come through, and I've read an occasional story here and there.
It's so boring. I don't blame you. It's just
well, yeah, exactly right, and it's a distraction, right? I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that what this is? It's political theater. It's something to keep the masses kind of fired up on both sides. If you were to read just the average Joe that might be dabble into politics, they're all about it, right? Because it's juicy gossip, and there's shots over the bow from both sides, and I put this in the same category of Trump with his drain the swamp, lock her up, None of that stuff has happened. None of it's going to happen. It was politically expedient at the time to say, and kudos to Trump for doing it. He's a businessman. He's a marketer. He's a brander. He knows what to do. He knew the base he was playing to, but I don't think he ever had any serious doubt or any serious concerns or thoughts about bringing up Hillary Clinton on charges, or any kind of serious thoughts about quote unquote draining the swamp. I mean, I know there's been some deregulation and some rollbacks, and that's great. We need to give credit where credit is due, but by and large, the monster continues to roll on there on the banks of the Potomac River. But at the end of the day, I think that's really what this all boils down to. I think it all boils down to it's this lowest common denominator. Give the masses what they want. Let's keep them distracted from the fact that we are, perpetually in war. We're continuing to oppress the rights of the states and the citizens of the states by just, completely regulating and controlling daily life. And it's unfortunate that if people could get as engaged and fired up about the things that really matter, the way that they do these like soap opera type incidents, I think we would be much better off for it in the long run. But it's what it is what it is, as they say.
Yeah, I agree. One more thing here before we close out. I was reading, and I had mentioned this earlier here when I was talking. I was reading some Real Clear Politics polling, Rasmussen polling, Fox News polling, and they have Trump's approval ratings, which are really not bad. Their overall approval ratings are mid 40s, which is fairly common for where he stands in his presidency right now. Although you would think he had an approval rating of 4, right?
Oh.
I mean, truthfully, the way that the media presents him, and with think about this, Justin, with all of this from CNN, CBS, NBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of this, he's still got a 45% approval rating, which is right about where Obama was. I think it's higher than Obama was at this point going in to the midterms. With all of the negative press, it means the average person is actually satisfied and they couldn't care less about this idiotic Russia collusion stuff because it doesn't matter in their daily lives. But one of the things, as I was looking through all of this polling data that was coming out, one of the things that I found interesting, and I'm trying to pull it up right now, I actually can't find it, was his approval rating among African Americans is extraordinarily high for a Republican president. I mean, extraordinarily high. And if this is an absolute disaster for Democrats, because all he needs is, look, if he were to pull like 15% of the African American vote, he is going to win 2020 in an absolute landslide. And his approval rating in that community is much higher than that. And this is the reason that they are so fervently calling him a racist and a Klan member and this is why this narrative just gets heaped on. And this is what I was talking about. They have to do this when we were talking about the immigration thing, but it's all political because the average person these deregulation measures and these tax cuts are colorblind. They don't pick and choose which race they go along with. They're for everybody, anybody and everybody is benefiting from this economic boom. And if you just look at the unemployment rates, it's not just really low for whites and really high for everybody else. It is really low for everybody. Wage growth is up for everybody. And this scares the leftists to death because they think there's going to be 4 more years of Trump. And I tell you what, if the numbers just keep polling the way that they are, there's no reason people aren't going to get off the sofa and go to the polling box in 2020 to vote in an alternative party if their life's going well. It's just not something they do. Americans have never reacted like that. If anything, you're going to see voter registration way down for 2020. You're going to see participation way down for 2020. And depending upon, who the left puts up there, I think he's just going to slide through. And so I think that's where a lot of the racism calls come from, but good polling news for him.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting too. I saw a Facebook story earlier this week where there was an African American minister, I believe it was, that was having at a summit or a round table at the White House, and he basically shocked the room by saying this is the most pro-black president that we've had in a long time, maybe even ever, and really started to go through and break down what he's doing for the black community. And of course, this guy's going to be an Uncle Tom. He's, going to be marginalized. He's going to be ridiculed and mocked and things of that nature, much like any black conservative is these days. But I do think that, results speak louder than rhetoric, most of the time, depending on which platform you have and whatnot. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think that's going to be interesting to see if that sticks, if the left has a hard time getting that any traction. What would they turn to next? You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I know they always have their fodder and their ideas as to what they want to try to do. Clearly the strategy that they took in 2016 backfired on them. I know there's a lot of talk about this quote unquote blue wave that is coming. I think that's a figment of the leftist media's imagination, especially when you look at some of the primaries that went down here recently. So I think we're going to learn a lot here in November when we get to these midterm elections and we see what shakes out in the House and the Senate. I think that'll be a little bit of a bellwether as to what we can expect in 2020, but it's still a long way to go. But yeah, if you're a Trump fan and certainly I couldn't care one way or the other. I'm a fan of, the economy and really how the markets are doing and how we as a country are coming together. And if there's positive news in that direction, then that's what I care about. So yeah, you're absolutely right to bring that up. And that was an important point this week to be made too. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to just about wrap us up for this evening. Unless, Mike, you had anything else you want to add here?
No, I think that was pretty good. And given the fact that we have this presidential series coming up, once something, if we get a bug up our nose, people are probably going to get more of these bonus episodes, I'm guessing, right? Because Sundays are going to be dedicated to the presidents, which means if we have something to talk about, we're going to have to throw bonus episodes in. So it's a win-win for everybody.
That's right. Yeah, we will definitely be bringing you lots of content, and yeah, when things come about, we don't want to let it just sit on the back burner and miss it through our presidential episodes, but we don't want to put those on the back burner either. So yeah, we're going to dedicate our normal weekly episodes to our presidential series, and yeah, as topics and time allow, then we will definitely be bringing you some bonus content with things like this. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. As always, if you ever have any questions, comments, feedback, anything for us on the show, you can reach us in one of the many, many ways that we are available through social media. You can reach me personally on Facebook at Justin Spears 4, on Twitter, the show page on Facebook at TOS Podcast, on Twitter at TOS_podcast. And you can reach us on our Google email, our Gmail accounts, Margison and Spears at gmail.com. And of course, you can get the show in many different ways. You can catch us on our YouTube page. You can search The Other Side with Margison and Spears. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, the Spreaker radio app, which is available through iTunes and Google Play individually. There's some great shows that you can catch through Spreaker as well. And we are a part of the Cerberus Radio Network. There are some really great things going on over at Cerberus. Suzanne Sherman is leading the charge with some new programming. She has brought on Mark Kreslins, who is a fantastic political mind out of Oklahoma. And just recently, the announcement of bringing on Dr. Gregory Carpenter, who is a fantastic mind, brilliant in the technology field, talks a lot about cybersecurity and things of that nature. He had a show on the Mike Church radio network, the Crusade radio network. And so he's come on board to bring us some shows as well. So tons of stuff that you can research through the Cerberus radio network. You can find the fan page there on Facebook for that as well. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode, and thanks for joining us on The Other Side.